So this week's readings, they were very interesting, and I thought about a lot of different things, so I'm going to try to encapsulate these in a clear manner in the next 3 to 5 minutes. The first thing I thought of when I was reading the historical perspective and the concept of justice and the definition starting back at Plato was that we're reading Plato, that's Western European and Western thought and origins, when I know that the concept of justice and how it's defined and what it is, those kinds of conversations were going on all over the world, but yet that's sort of where we begin, and that's where most of our texts and our learning, our concepts come from, is from that sort of European lens. So that's the first thing I thought about. The second thing I thought about when looking at social justice and justice's definition was that when these conversations were going on, they didn't apply to everyone, and mostly because they were about humans and human good. And what we've done throughout history and throughout time is we've used laws and policies to dehumanize. And so until everyone's fully recognized and valued as a human, those conversations don't really apply to them. So the Jesuit priest that got credit for the social justice definition of having common groups all working for the common good, that was done, I think, in 1840 or something like that. And in 1838, the Jesuit flagship institution, Georgetown University, had just sold 272 slaves to someone in Louisiana so that they could remain solvent and avoid bankruptcy. These priests had owned slaves. The slaves had built the university, and in order to remain solvent, they sold them. So 2 years later, we have this Jesuit priest and this notion of social justice, but it was about groups for the common good, and these groups were at different levels of society, right? So again, back to the dehumanization. And interestingly enough, the descendants of these slaves at Georgetown are now asking the university for reparations. And although the university has publicly apologized, acknowledged their contribution, and had a couple of buildings named after them and maybe some considerations for admission, they really haven't done anything beyond that. And that is a really good question, like, how do we provide reparations to these groups that have been disenfranchised? I mean, you can also look at World War II, where Japanese Americans in California were put in internment camps. You know, they weren't Germany wasn't the only country that had camps. We didn't kill them, but they lost most of their property and their livelihood. So how do we make up for these injustices, and do we have responsibility to do that? And that's a really interesting question, I think. When we talked about the laws and what social justice looked like from a distributive lens or beyond, I really liked Kenneth Howe's work, where he said that it had to be a combination of distributive and social justice. So Brown, for example, Brown versus Board of Education, when we had this rapid desegregation movement, a lot of the students, they faced danger for their lives. They were continually stigmatized, and they basically had additional barriers. So there wasn't really equality. They were in the same location, but they were being oppressed in other ways, which didn't help them. So what I was wondering is, had we done that in a different way, would we be in a better spot? Like, there are a lot of thriving institutions for students of color, and we have evidence to show that all women's institutions, HBCUs, all of these places where students can feel safe and encouraged and they have resources, have actually helped people. So I wonder if we had given opportunities and equal funding to those arenas first before we did this rapid desegregation, would that have helped? And then we could have done it a different way. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but I just wonder what the best way is for us to define social justice, decide what the common good is, determine how we do that, both within policy and within the classroom, and then what do we have responsibility to in order for making amends to people. So those are my questions. Thanks.